You're driving like you always do, seatbelt on, eyes forward, nothing unusual. And then, in a single moment, a traffic stop. It feels routine at first, but what most drivers don't realize is this. The moment you have a firearm anywhere inside your vehicle, that routine stop can instantly become a constitutional situation. Not because you did something wrong, but because the law treats that moment differently. And now, after a major Supreme Court ruling, the rules have become even more important to understand. So, let me ask you this, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If you are legally carrying a firearm in your car, do you believe the police automatically have the right to search your vehicle during a traffic stop? Think about that carefully, because this is exactly where confusion leads to real legal consequences. What we're talking about today is not a rumor, not speculation, but the broader legal implications of a unanimous Supreme Court decision reinforcing how constitutional protections apply during vehicle stops involving firearms. While the facts of each case vary, the core principle is consistent. Your rights do not disappear simply because a firearm is present, but they are interpreted within a specific legal framework. To understand this, we need to go back to the foundation. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. That protection applies inside your vehicle, but in a more limited way than it does inside your home. This is known as the automobile exception, a doctrine that has existed for nearly a century. Historically, the Supreme Court recognized that vehicles are mobile, evidence can be moved, situations can change quickly. Because of that, the standard for searching a vehicle has always been lower than the standard for searching a residence. But lower does not mean absent. In my legal analysis, the key issue is probable cause. If law enforcement has probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed or that evidence of a crime is inside the vehicle, they may conduct a search without a warrant. Now here's where the presence of a firearm becomes legally significant. For many years, courts struggled with a fundamental question: does the mere presence of a firearm create probable cause? Recent Supreme Court reasoning suggests the answer is no. There's a strong constitutional argument that lawful possession of a firearm, by itself, does not eliminate Fourth Amendment protections. Courts would likely examine whether the officer had specific, articulable facts suggesting criminal activity beyond mere possession. And that's a critical distinction, because without that distinction, lawful behavior could be treated as suspicious by default, and that raises serious constitutional concerns. Now let's bring in the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms has been reaffirmed in multiple Supreme Court decisions over the past 2 decades. Those rulings emphasize that lawful firearm possession is a protected constitutional activity. In my legal analysis, when you combine Second Amendment protections with Fourth Amendment safeguards, you get a clear principle: lawful possession should not automatically justify intrusion. However, that principle does not exist in isolation. Courts also recognize legitimate law enforcement interests, including officer safety. During a traffic stop, officers are allowed to take reasonable steps to ensure their safety, which can include asking about weapons or temporarily securing them under certain circumstances. Courts would likely examine whether those actions were reasonable and proportionate to the situation. Now let's consider the Fifth Amendment. During any traffic stop, you have the right to remain silent beyond providing required identification and documentation. You are not required to answer questions that could incriminate you. But here's where many people make a mistake. They confuse silence with resistance. In my legal analysis, there is a difference between refusing to comply with lawful orders and choosing not to provide unnecessary information. The law requires cooperation with lawful commands. It does not require self-incrimination. Now let's talk about federal versus state law, because this is where confusion becomes even more common. Firearm laws vary widely across states. Some states require immediate disclosure if you are carrying. Others do not. Some states allow permitless carry. Others require licensing. But constitutional protections apply nationwide. This creates a layered legal environment where your obligations depend on both the state you are in and the broader constitutional framework. And that's exactly why misunderstandings happen. Now let's connect this to real-world impact. You're pulled over. The officer approaches. At some point, the presence of a firearm becomes known, either because you disclose it as required by law or because it becomes visible. At that moment, the legal dynamics change, not because you've done something wrong, but because the situation now involves multiple layers of constitutional analysis. In my legal analysis, the most important factor is how both parties behave. If the driver remains calm, respectful, and compliant with lawful orders, the interaction is far more likely to remain controlled and predictable. If the officer acts within constitutional limits, the legal integrity of the stop is preserved. But if either side misunderstands the law, complications arise. Now consider the risks of non-compliance. Failing to follow state-specific firearm disclosure laws can lead to legal penalties, even if the firearm itself is legally possessed. Providing inconsistent or unnecessary statements can create legal exposure under the Fifth Amendment, and misunderstanding your rights can lead to unintended consent or escalation. These are not theoretical risks. They are real outcomes that happen every day. Now let's address the political reality. A unanimous Supreme Court decision, 9-0, signals something important. It reflects a rare level of agreement on a constitutional principle. That doesn't mean every detail is settled, but it does mean the core reasoning is likely to influence future cases. Supporters of this legal direction argue that it protects individual rights while still allowing law enforcement to do their job, and there is validity in that argument. At the same time, critics may argue that the balance between individual rights and public safety remains delicate. In my legal analysis, both perspectives deserve consideration, because constitutional law is not static. It evolves through interpretation, application, and real-world testing. Courts would likely continue to refine how these principles apply in different scenarios. Looking ahead, the long-term implications are significant. As more people lawfully carry firearms, interactions between drivers and law enforcement will continue to increase. As those interactions increase, legal clarity becomes more important. And as legal challenges arise, courts will continue shaping the boundaries of constitutional protection. So what does this mean for you? It means understanding that your rights remain intact, but they operate within a legal structure that requires awareness and responsibility. It means recognizing that lawful conduct must be paired with informed behavior. It means knowing that the outcome of a traffic stop is influenced not just by the law, but by how well you understand it. Because in that moment, on the side of the road, everything comes down to clarity. Clarity of rights, clarity of responsibilities, clarity of conduct. If this helped you see how quickly a routine stop can become a constitutional issue, subscribe for more clear, real-world legal breakdowns that actually matter. And share your thoughts in the comments, because informed discussion is how people stay prepared. Know your rights, respect the law, and never assume the two are separate.